The sea raged as the storm tore apart the ship, waves crashing violently against the deck. Ricardo opened his eyes, feeling dizzy, his throat dry and his head aching. He was lying on the cold sand, his body stiff and numb. For a few moments, he couldn't remember what had happened. Then it hit him, the shipwreck. He remembered the chaos, the screams, and the water swallowing him. Looking around, he saw no sign of other survivors. There was only the sound of waves and the sight of an island looming in the distance. He struggled to his feet, his legs weak from exhaustion, and began walking along the beach, shouting for help. Hours passed, but no one answered. Suddenly, a voice came from the trees. Ricardo froze. "Is someone there?" he called out, his heart racing. From the dense forest, a figure emerged. It was a woman, wearing a long, ragged dress. "I'm here," she said softly, her voice rough from the storm. Ricardo stared at her, confused. "Who are you?" he asked. "I'm Sister Clara," she answered. "And you?" "Ricardo," he replied, still disoriented. Sister Clara explained that she had been part of a small mission group on a boat when the storm hit. "I don't know where the others are," she said. The two of them didn't have much to say, both too tired and hungry to speak. They set off together, searching the island for food and fresh water. They found a stream, cool and clear, and drank deeply. The next task was finding shelter. They worked side by side, gathering branches and leaves to build a small shelter. That night, the island was silent, but there was tension in the air. Ricardo couldn't help but watch Sister Clara, amazed by how calm she was. Despite their desperate situation, she never seemed afraid. Sister Clara, however, avoided eye contact, focusing entirely on the task at hand. In the following days, they started to open up. Ricardo told her about his boring office job and his life that felt like it was going nowhere. "This trip was supposed to help me escape," he said with a bitter laugh. "I never imagined I'd end up here," he added. Clara was quiet for a long time before speaking. "Before I took my vows, I lived a normal life, but I felt something pulling me toward a different path," she said softly. Ricardo was curious. "Don't you miss your old life?" he asked. "Sometimes," she admitted, gazing at the ocean. "But I found peace I never knew I needed." Ricardo noticed how beautiful she was, even in the harsh conditions, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he began teasing her. "I bet you broke someone's heart when you decided to become a nun." Clara didn't smile. "I've never regretted my choice," she said, "and I'm not here to discuss my past." Ricardo grinned, respecting her response. "You're stronger than you seem," he said. Days passed, and they grew closer as they worked together to survive. They fished and gathered wood for a fire, becoming more familiar with each other. But Ricardo began testing Clara's limits, making jokes and remarks that flirted with the line between friendship and something more. One evening, as they sat by the fire, he decided to be more direct. "You know," he said, "if things were different, we could be more than just survivors on this island. Maybe even something more." Clara looked at him, surprised. "We're here to survive, Ricardo," she said firmly. "Nothing more." Ricardo could tell she was trying to distance herself, but there was a brief moment of hesitation in her eyes. That night, neither of them slept much, both lost in their thoughts. For Clara, the memories of her past life began to resurface. For Ricardo, his attraction to her grew stronger. The next day, as they worked together to set up a trap, Ricardo spoke again. "You know," he said quietly, "I've never met anyone like you. You're calm, strong, but there's a sadness to you." Clara paused, her gaze on the ground. "I don't carry sadness," she replied. "I carry my faith, and that's what keeps me going." Ricardo frowned, feeling the weight of her words. "It's not always easy to believe, is it?" he asked. "If there's a God, why are we here? Why did we end up on this island?" Clara looked at him, her eyes calm but serious. "I don't know why we're here, Ricardo, but I believe everything has a purpose, even this." As the days wore on, Ricardo began to see the island differently. Before the shipwreck, his life felt empty. "I used to live just to pay the bills," he confessed one evening. "I didn't care about anyone. This trip, I thought, would give me an escape, but now I'm starting to understand that I was running from something, maybe from myself." Clara listened quietly. Ricardo gazed into the fire. "And you, Clara, you make me believe that life can have meaning. You make me want to be a better person." Clara looked at him, her face a mix of sympathy and concern. "I understand," she said gently, "but don't mistake your feelings for something that isn't real." We're here to survive, not to start something else." Despite her words, Ricardo couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing between them. But he respected her choice, knowing it was out of his hands. One day, while exploring the coast, they found a crate washed ashore. Inside were survival supplies and, most importantly, an emergency radio. Clara saw it as a sign of divine intervention. "God has answered us," she said, her eyes bright with hope. Ricardo, however, was less sure. "What if no one answers?" he asked. "What if we're still stuck here, waiting for something that never comes?" Clara placed a hand on his arm. "Hope doesn't fade," she said. "It's what keeps us going." They used the radio to send a distress signal, but the days passed with no response. During this time, Ricardo became more aware of his feelings. One evening, sitting by the fire, he turned to Clara. "Clara, I need to tell you something," he said. "I've fallen in love with you. I can't pretend it hasn't happened." Clara was quiet for a long time before speaking. "Ricardo, what you feel is real, but we can't let it change who we are. I've made a choice, and that choice defines me. I can't go back on it." Ricardo lowered his gaze, hurt but understanding. "What if it's fate? What if we're meant to be together?" Clara met his eyes, her gaze filled with compassion. "Our meeting wasn't by chance," she said softly. "But it's not for the reasons you think. Maybe we're here to help each other see who we truly are and what we truly want." Days later, a rescue ship arrived. The moment had come for them to leave the island, and as the ship approached, the two stood side by side, saying nothing. There was an unspoken understanding between them. After they were rescued, Marco and Clara parted ways. Ricardo returned to his old life, but something had changed. He decided to leave his job and volunteer for a charity that helped people in need. He found new purpose in helping others, and every time he gave aid, he thought of Clara and how she had shown him a new way to live. Meanwhile, Clara returned to her convent, strengthened in her faith. She often thought of Ricardo, not with longing, but with a quiet understanding of how their time on the island had changed them both. A year later, Ricardo received a letter. It was simple, just a few words. "Never stop seeking your path, Ricardo. Hope never fades if you keep believing in it." With a smile, Ricardo knew who it was from. Clara's words had stayed with him, guiding him as he continued his journey. Though their paths had diverged, the bond they shared remained, a silent thread between them, reminding them of the lessons learned on that island. Would you have acted the same? Would you have found the courage to change your life? Share your thoughts, like and subscribe for more stories.